Today, the right-wing attack on women's right to choose suffered a big setback when a federal judge blocked part of a North Carolina law that forced women to view ultrasounds before having an abortion. But most of the law is still on the books. That includes an outrageous new Choose Life license plate. Each plate will send $15 to fund so-called crisis pregnancy centers. You've probably seen ads for these centers. They promise options for women facing unplanned pregnancies. But really, they're just fronts for conservative anti-choice groups. A new report by NARAL North Carolina says these centers use false advertising, misleading women with inaccurate information, and use counselors who have little, if any, medical experience. Recent documentary shows how these anti-choice activists hide the fact they don't actually offer abortions.
When she calls and she says, do you do abortions? I say, are you calling for yourself or are you calling for your friend? She says, I'm calling for myself. I say, well, when did you have a pregnancy test? And we engage in conversation. Because if she calls and says, do you do abortions? And I say, no, click.
Joining me now is Carey Pope, Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice North Carolina, the group leading this investigation into the crisis pregnancy centers. Carey, thanks for joining me tonight. And let me ask you, were you surprised by these findings?
Yeah, we were really alarmed by these findings. I mean, no matter how one feels about the question of legal abortion, I think we can all agree that women shouldn't be misled about their health care options. And unfortunately, that's clearly what's happening at crisis pregnancy centers in North Carolina.
Now, let me show you this where we have seen in the report that it states clearly that several CPCs even outfitted their staff in scrubs and white lab coats like those worn by doctors and nurses in legitimate hospitals and clinics. So in these crisis pregnancy centers, they've actually were found to be clothing people looking like doctors and nurses when they in fact had no medical experience at all?
That's correct. About 94% of the centers we investigated had no medical training or staff, and yet they were outfitting their staff in scrubs, white lab coats. Some of them were actually performing medical services such as free ultrasounds and STI testing.
Well, wait a minute, Carey. You're saying, let me pull that graph back up. You're saying 92, you're saying 94. Our research, 92% don't even have medical professionals on staff?
That's correct. That's
24% disclose they're not medical facilities. So how are they allowed to operate advertising to women that they can come here and get abortions?
Well, because of the fact that they're not licensed medical facilities, they don't have to disclose that information, and they don't, you know, in many of the fine print, it says that our volunteers collected, it says things like, you know, we can disclose your medical information to anyone we want to. And the reason for that is that they're not bound by the privacy laws that legitimate medical facilities are upheld to.
Now, let me show you something else out of your report that was startling. The false claims that they have put up in these crisis pregnancy centers. They say abortions increase risk of breast cancer, post-abortion stress. Abortion is very risky procedure. Condoms and oral contraceptives don't work. I mean, whatever one's view of abortions or pro-life or choice, to just outright fabricate things. Many women going through a traumatic and stressful decision-making in their life, to use false information to further add to that is the most immoral and should be illegal thing in the country.
We agree with that. We agree. It's very alarming and disturbing that many crisis pregnancy centers are telling women that condoms just aren't effective. That's putting their health at risk, and it's putting the health of the community at risk. And scaring women out of having an abortion by telling them that it's going to cause things like breast cancer, when the National Cancer Institute as well as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have both debunked that claim. Telling women that abortion causes post-abortion stress syndrome, that's not even a medically recognized term. So these lies that CPCs are continuing to espouse are incredibly alarming and incredibly disturbing.
And they seem to be pushing this since 2010. Let me show you this map. Since 2010, you've had measures in 16 states all over the country enacting laws against abortion. 34 measures in 16 states since 2010. So this is a political movement. And again, people have the right to agree to it, but you don't have the right to lie. We can have different opinions. We can't have different facts. Carey Pope, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Al.
We'll be right back.